So what this lecture is really all about is looking at not only the Philadelphia exhibition, which in and of itself is a really interesting development in the progression of World's Fairs, and I would argue probably the first of the modern era of World's Fairs, but also the influence that it had on the development and the progression of design work in cut glass and what really became the brilliant period, the really elaborate designs that became so successful from about the 1880s on through until about World War I, when a lot of the American cut glass started to fade away and go out of fashion. So the Philadelphia exhibition played a really pivotal role in the evolution and ultimately the success of the American cut glass industry. But before we get to the Philadelphia exhibition, I want to touch on two previous World's Fairs. The first one being the Crystal Palace exhibition in London in 1851 and the New York Crystal Palace exhibition in 1853, because those two World's Fairs were really the beginning of more elaborate and more extensive World's Fairs, and they also played a role in terms of the development of the American cut glass industry. So in 1851 in London, one of the American companies, the Brooklyn Flint Glass Works, which later became the Corning Glass Works, was an exhibitor. And they received quite a lot of very favorable publicity around the quality of their glass, and in particular, the publications around the World's Fair, and particularly the ones in London, commented very favorably on the quality of the American cut glass being produced and displayed at the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition. And the Crystal Palace exhibition in and of itself, the Crystal Palace in and of itself, was a true engineering marvel because the building itself, this huge building, was made entirely of iron and glass, and you had all of the various displays enclosed in this really remarkable building. The kinds of glassware that were exhibited by Brooklyn Flint are shown on the next couple of slides. So this example of a decanter is in the collection of the Corning Museum of Glass, and it is identical to one that the Brooklyn Flint Glass Works displayed at the Crystal Palace exhibition in London in 1851. Relatively simple design with these vertical miters on the bottom and then flute panels on the top, but clean, elegant, and just a really nice design, and the quality of the glass was really outstanding as well. Those were the kinds of things that received favorable comment from the press in London. And another example here, this is in the collection of the Factory Museum here, identical in its shape, but with a slightly different design on the base with block star and block diamonds on the base of the body of the decanter. So those are good representative examples of the kind of glassware being produced in New York in the early 1850s and then being exhibited at the Crystal Palace exhibition in London. Now in 1853, New York emulated London and had their own Crystal Palace exhibition. And they also built an iron and glass building that took up an entire city block in New York. And again, a number of the American glass companies exhibited at the 1853 New York Crystal Palace exhibition, both including Brooklyn Flint Glass Works, but also including another Frenchman, Joseph Stuyvesant, and the work that he was producing in New York in the early 1850s as well. And this decanter matches the shape and the form of decanters that Stuyvesant exhibited at the 1853 Crystal Palace exhibition. Here you have sharp diamond cutting around the body of the decanter, hollow diamond cutting on the neck, and again, relatively simple designs, but really quite elegant in their execution, and also the glass blank being of very high quality. So a good example of New York glass in the early 1850s being exhibited at the Crystal Palace Exhibition and also getting very favorable reviews as well. And this began to plant the seeds in the minds of consumers that American companies were able to produce glass and other products that were equal to or perhaps even better than their European competitors. Because the bias up until about this time had always been, if you truly wanted quality, and the luxury market wanted quality goods, then you really needed to purchase your goods from Europe. And the American companies wanted to try to show the quality of the work that they were doing and establish their reputation as for excellence, both in design and in the execution of the pieces that they produced.
How do you determine the quality of the glass?
So if you look at the clarity and the color. So you're looking at very clear glass, and you're also looking at glass with this very white color. So this is a really good example. This is a celery vase made by Stuyvesant. This is now in the collection of the Corning Museum of Glass. It has this stepwise cutting on the body of the celery vase, and then a simple cut stem with panels on the stem, and then a cut foot with lots of rays to the star on the foot. But if you look at the quality of the glass, how clear it is, uniformly good quality, no imperfections, and also this very white color, that's exactly what consumers were looking for, and you wanted to establish that uniformity in clarity and also in the quality of the glass itself, the purity of the color. I will also tell you, as you looked at some of the glass being produced in the 1850s in New York and elsewhere as well, you will see more variations in color. So some have more of a yellowish or a grayish cast to them, but this is what you really wanted. This absolute clear white color. That was the ultimate objective in terms of what these companies were trying to achieve.
So they don't have anything to do with the strength of the glass or anything like that?
Not so much to do with the strength of the glass. It's more the quality of the raw materials, how you cared for them and prepared them, thoroughly washing the materials, and how the materials were heated, formed into glass, and how the blanks, the shapes were blown as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another Stuyvesant example here, and there were woodblock prints that were reprinted in the newspaper that showed a number of the shapes and designs that were exhibited both in the London exhibition and also the later New York exhibition. And this design here with the sharp diamonds and the fans at the top matches examples that were exhibited at the 1853 Crystal Palace exhibition. And this is another Stuyvesant piece as well. So now I'm going to touch on a few Dorflinger pieces produced during this same period. 1853 was a little too early for Dorflinger. He had opened his first factory in Brooklyn in 1852, but he was concentrating initially on commercial products, lamp chimneys, chimneys for lamps, and pharmacy equipment, getting his business up and running and established, focusing on the blowing part of the business in terms of producing those kinds of products. It didn't take him long to get to the point where he could produce the fine lead crystal tableware that he'd been trained to make in France, but 1853 was a little too early for him to be an exhibitor at the Crystal Palace exhibition, but he caught up pretty quickly. This is a really good example of a very early Dorflinger piece, about 1856 to 1858. Again, you can see the same characteristics. The very clear glass in terms of its color, the purity of the glass itself, no imperfections, uniformity on color. This is just a good early example of a Dorflinger piece that was achieving that same level of performance as some of Dorflinger's peers in New York at the same time. This piece also has some of the early hallmarks of a little earlier design. So you have a very large foot. You have a design on the foot called the Brooklyn Star with these large rays and then the fans in between, a solid stem, and then a fairly wide bowl on the comport. and then with these alternating panels of these diagonal cut designs, and then flat fluted panels alternating around the piece. So good example of Dorflinger's early work, also very characteristic of work in the 1850s by these companies in New York. The other thing that you see consistently through all these pieces, a relative simplicity of design. They're not overly complex, but they're relatively simple and elegant in their execution. Here are some other examples. Back up one more. Done in exactly the same pattern that we saw on the comport in the previous case. Here is a covered comport, decanter, and then a goblet. These are a couple of years later. These are going to be more 1858 to 1860, and you can see how quickly Dorflinger is catching up to the prevailing fashions of design in New York in the later 1850s. So this comport, instead of that heavy solid stem that you have in the previous comport here, you've got the hollow cut fluted stem. And also you have a covered comport, and the shape of the comport is a little bit more modern as well. So Dorflinger is catching up to the trends in design fairly quickly and fairly easily. This is a very famous example of Dorflinger's work. This is called the Dorflinger Guards vase. It was produced in 1859 and given to Mrs. Dorflinger by the Dorflinger Guards. The Dorflinger Guards was a ceremonial quasi-military guard force for the Dorflinger factories. It's inscribed in terms of the dedication to Mrs. Dorflinger. Wonderful example of the work that Dorflinger was now doing at the end of the 1850s. But again, you see examples of a buckle style pattern at the top, these bullseyes around the base of the vase, and an elaborately cut foot. So you can see, even though this is still the 1850s, you're starting to get more elaborate design elements, still relatively simple, but more elaborate than the earlier pieces that we've seen. Another example of a dated Dorflinger piece. This is the Dorflinger Guards comport, presented to W.C. Fowler, and this is in the Corning Museum of Glass. I should say that the Dorflinger vase in the previous slide is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So this is in the Corning Museum of Glass, and again you can see these panels going around with fine diamond cutting, these arched panels at the top with notches on the top form, the hollow cut stem. So another wonderful example of Dorflinger's work. This piece is dated 1860. So again, these early years of Dorflinger's work in New York. And here's a close-up of the engraving on the comport presented to W.C. Fowler by the Dorflinger Guards. This is another early Dorflinger piece. This vase is in the Corning Museum of Glass. It was a family piece donated to the Corning Museum of Glass with hollow diamond cutting at the top of the vase, large diamond cutting around the center, and then flutes on the plinth at the bottom, and with a folded rim, which is really actually unusual for a Dorflinger piece. So this is going to be early 1860s. Again, all of this glass, you can see the quality, the uniformity in terms of the quality of the glass, the nice white color, pure color in the piece. Good hallmarks of the work that was being done in New York in the 1860s now as we get into the 1860s. And also, again, relatively simple but elegant designs. This is another Dorflinger family piece donated to the Corning Museum of Glass, a covered comport. This is early 1860s with hollow diamond cutting at the top and hollow diamond cutting at the bottom, and then two bands of engraved berries on the lid and on the body of the comport. Good representative example of the work being done by Dorflinger at his Greenpoint factory in the early 1860s. And here's an example in the Factory Museum, exactly the same shape and form, hollow diamond cutting at the top and the bottom, large diamond cuttings on the two big panels on the lid and also on the base, Brooklyn Star foot as well. And this is also a good representative example of Dorflinger's work from the early 1860s. This is a Dorflinger family piece, came from the John and David Dorflinger collection, and it's now in the collection of the Factory Museum. Flute cut panels, heavy flute cut panels on the top of the celery vase, the hollow stem, and the Brooklyn Star foot as well. Again, very characteristic of Dorflinger's work and the work being done by Dorflinger's peers in New York and in New England in the early 1860s. And engraved with grape leaves going up and down the fluted panels on the top of the celery vase. This comport is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and this came from the Johns Hopkins table service. So it has the H monogram for Johns Hopkins, the alternating panels of strawberry diamond and hollow diamond, the hollow stem, and a relatively large heavy foot. Again, early 1860s, great representation of Dorflinger's work in New York during this time period. And here are three examples of stemware from the Hopkins service: a water goblet and two wines, all with the H monogram. We have a set of these. The Metropolitan Museum of Art has a set of these as well from the Hopkins table service. Again, good representative examples of the work that Dorflinger was doing in the 1860s. This large comport is in the collection of the Dorflinger Glass Museum, Dorflinger family piece, engraving around the top of the bowl, fluted panels around the base of the bowl, the scalloped rim around the top, hollow stem, and also the Brooklyn Star foot. Great example of Dorflinger's work in New York in the early 1860s with a great monogram on it as well. And this is a detail of the engraving work as well. So some of these pieces, as we've seen, were cut. Some were a combination of cutting and engraving. Engraving was getting more and more popular in the 1860s, moving on into the 1870s as well. And I talked about these pieces. These are the Alger vases in the same pattern and design, including the U.S. coat of arms here as the Lincoln White House service. Another good representative example of Dorflinger's work in the 1860s. These look a little darker and grayer, but it's more the quality of the picture than the glass itself. And again, this was in my presentation, my last presentation on White House glass. This whiskey jug done in the same pattern and design as the Lincoln service, but a piece done for a private individual. These decanters are in the Ray Latourneau collection upstairs. Wonderful examples of Dorflinger's French influence, the shape and the designs of the shape of the objects, and then also cut in that same pattern as the Lincoln service, but with a monogram instead of the engraved ivy design around the center of the decanters. And one of my favorite pieces of Dorflinger glass, this ewer or pitcher, hollow diamond cutting on the top, engraved fish on the body, just a classic, elegant form. But as you look at all of these pieces, what you get is a simplicity of design, excellence in execution, good quality in terms of the glass being produced, and uniformity. And that was all characteristic of the work being done in New York and New England in this time period. This is early White Mills. You can see these two bottles with the Lutz stoppers, with miter cuts going around the bottles. Again, relatively simple in design and execution, but also uniformly good quality in terms of color and also in terms of the cutting. Another early White Mills example of a pitcher hollow diamond cutting above and below, and then bellflower engraving around the center body of the picture. So again, Dorflinger, like some of the other American companies, were increasingly, as you got into the 1860s, moving toward 1870s, working in engraving into their design as engraving became more and more popular. And two other examples here, two decanters, again, of Dorflinger's engraving. Early white mills, more into the 1860s, getting toward 1870, with this very light and delicate engraving with the fairly elaborate monograms, very similar to the comport in the Dorflinger Glass Museum, engraving on the stoppers as well. Good characteristic examples of what we were seeing in white mills as well, kind of carrying Dorflinger's experience from New York over to his early work here. And finally, one more goblet, again, relatively simple in design and in shape, hollow diamond cutting, grape leaf engraving around the top of the bowl, hollow knob cut and faceted, and then the Brooklyn Star foot as well. Thus, all of these are good examples of the kinds of work that the American companies were doing in the 1850s, 1860s, then getting on toward 1870, and really representative of what Dorothy Daniels has called the middle period of cut glass production in America. So that brings us to the Philadelphia exhibition, because that's when things really started to change. So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the exposition itself, because it was really an important historical moment for the country and also for American industry, including the glass industry. So the formal name of the Philadelphia exhibition was the International Exhibition of Arts, Manufactures, and Products of the Soil and Mine. And the purpose, the official purpose of the exhibition was to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And so whenever you see material that was produced around the time of the exhibition, and this engraving of the exhibition, the main exhibit hall, is a wonderful example of that. You see these patriotic themes repeated over and over again. So here you have the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence, but you also have the Civil War worked in as well, Lee's surrender to Grant at Appomattox here. So these historical and patriotic themes were core elements of the exhibition, and it was really at least the official purpose of the exhibition. But there were two other very important other purposes that weren't as stated as explicitly, but a second objective of the exhibition was to convey to not only the American public, but to the world, the innovation and the quality of invention that was taking place in America and leading to the kinds of industrial capabilities that the country was really developing. And I think that really became one of the core objectives of the exhibition. It certainly was something that the commissioners and the government wanted to emphasize as a key role of the exhibition in terms of making the public and the international community, the visitors who came to the exhibition, aware of the innovation and inventiveness of American industry and what that inventiveness was doing in terms of leading to the industrial capability of the country and the products that were being produced for consumers. And then a third objective, and you see that tied into the references to the Civil War here and up here as well, was to try to help continue the healing of the country. So you still had open wounds as a result of the Civil War, and another objective of the exhibition was to try to reduce those those regional differences and try to bring the country together. And so those were really the three objectives of what the commissioners were trying to achieve with the Philadelphia exhibition. And this was all taking place at a time of fairly rapid change within the country. So you had an expanding national marketplace for goods and services. You had a growing consumer society, consumerism in the country. You had migration going on from east to west and from south to north. You had a rapid increase in immigration. So increasingly, workers, including skilled workers, were coming in, particularly from Europe, looking for new opportunities in the country. And a growing industrialization, and particularly in terms of the small-scale agrarian society that America had, that was beginning to diminish as people moved to the cities and as you began to see industrial development within the country. The exhibition opened on May 10th and closed on November 10th. So it was open for 6 months. During that 6-month period, almost 10 million people visited the Philadelphia exhibition. And that's a pretty big number, but then consider what the United States population was. The US population at the time was 46 million people. So obviously you had some repeat visitors, but in effect you had the equivalent of 20% of the country visiting the Philadelphia exhibition. So this was a huge opportunity for industrial America and various industries within the country to be able to show their products and show what they could accomplish and what they could produce. The fair occupied 285 acres in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, almost 2 million square feet of exhibit space. And of that 2 million square feet of exhibit space, about 2/3 was devoted to American companies, and about 1/3 was to international exhibitors. More than 30,000 exhibitors participated in the exhibition, and of those, about 9,000 were American companies. So this was a major endeavor. The other element that I think played into the thinking of the organizers of the fair, and certainly the American exhibitors, was the financial panic that had just taken place in 1873. And so these companies were really eager to be able to show what they could do, what they could produce, and to try to grow and expand and build their markets. There were 5 main buildings in the fair. The main exhibition building, which is the one that's pictured right here in the center of this engraving. The machinery hall that showed all of the mechanical and industrial equipment. The agricultural hall that displayed and talked about the mechanization of agriculture in the country, the horticultural hall, flowers, plants, and finally the memorial hall and the art annex. There were a total of 250 buildings, but those were the 5 main ones. The buildings included hotels, restaurants, comfort stations, which is something that was new in World's Fairs. So the planners and the organizers really thought about the convenience and the comfort of what they were providing because they really wanted to encourage American visitors and also encourage visitors from abroad. There were new taste treats that were introduced at the Philadelphia exhibition. Popcorn, soda, and ice cream sodas, all introduced at the Philadelphia exhibition. New inventions were displayed: the telephone, the typewriter, electric lights. All of those were exhibited for the first time at the Philadelphia exhibition. Powerful industrial products like the Corliss steam engine that powered much of the equipment in the Philadelphia exhibition were part of the exhibitions and featured parts of the exhibition as well. Transportation played a key role. The Pennsylvania Railroad built a train station directly across from the entrance to the fair. There were trolleys and above ground railroad within the fairgrounds. You could rent rolling chairs to get around the fair. You could ride the elevated train, or you could walk. The number of visitors at times actually overwhelmed the transportation arrangements that were provided for the fair. The Pennsylvania Railroad had built new railway cars for the trains to bring people into the fair, but at times they were so overwhelmed that they had to bring in freight cars to move people to and from the fairgrounds. An American subsidiary of the British firm Thomas Cook offered package tours that covered your transportation to America and to the fair, your lodging, and your meals. And that was really a new innovation at the Philadelphia Exhibition as well, and it led to the modern travel industry, not only in this country, but around the world. Detailed planning was done in terms of categorizing the exhibitors and the types of products that were being exhibited at the fair. And the fair organizers spent extensive periods of time working on coming up with a system for categorizing and identifying the industries and also the products that they produced. And that system of categorization became the Dewey Decimal System that we've used in our libraries for years and years and years. So lots of interesting innovations in terms of the work that was done to prepare for and execute the Philadelphia Exhibition. I'm going to touch on a few more slides that show you the fairgrounds. So here's a bird's eye view of the fairgrounds. Here, this building on the left was the main exhibition hall, the machinery building here, the art annex and the arts complex here, and horticulture and agriculture back here. But you can see how extensive the fairgrounds were on Fairmount Park.
Did Dale Carnegie have anything to do with any of these, the construction that was done here, or was that a little later on?
I think it must have been later on.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of literature about the fair. And in fact, there's a terrific book that was the report of the commissioners after the fair was concluded that includes a lot of detail. I didn't see a reference to him in that volume. Here's some other images. Here's the horticultural hall at the top. Here's the main building, here the main exhibition building, and then again the art gallery down at the bottom, as we saw in the previous engraving. There were photographs, but there were also lots of engravings done of the fair. The arm for the Statue of Liberty was exhibited at the Philadelphia Exhibition, and as you can see, you could pay to climb up in the arm and get up to the top where the torch was. It would be years before the money would be raised to actually build and install the Statue of Liberty, but this was the first instance where you had the arm on display. Later on, I think it was on display for several years at Madison Park in New York as part of the fundraising effort to raise the money to complete the Statue of Liberty. Here's the Bell's telephone. And here's opening day on May 10th. 10,000 people attended the opening day ceremonies. President Grant made an opening speech at the opening ceremonies. The leading foreign dignitary was the Emperor of Brazil. And he and his wife were there as well. Lots of festivities, lots of activities. 10,000 people to kick off the opening of the fair. This is the Corliss engine that powered much of the machinery in the machinery hall, and this engraving shows Emperor Dom Pedro II of Brazil and President Grant jointly starting the Corliss engine at the opening ceremonies for the exhibition. This is a wonderful little document, and Kurt showed this in one of his presentations as well. This was in June Dorflinger Hardy's collection of materials, and it's now in the Dorflinger Glass Museum's collection. And this is a telegram that Christian Dorflinger sent to Mrs. Dorflinger on the opening day of the World's Fair, where he says, "The opening a great success. President Grant and all the governors are here, plus Emperor of Brazil, says the glassware is the finest ever seen, has given us an order for a set. I'll be home tomorrow, if possible." Yeah. Just a great little document. Number one, we didn't know that the Emperor of Brazil had ordered a set of Dorflinger glassware, and we don't know what it looks like, but just a great capture of the day's activities on opening day. Here's a copy of the ticket, the admission ticket for the World's Fair. Costs 50 cents for admission to the fairgrounds. And here's the back of the ticket.
That's probably a lot of money then, right?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't go back to scale it up to what the cost would be in today's dollars, but it was not insubstantial. Yeah. Now, on the glass side, a local Philadelphia company, Gillanders and Sons, which made luxury cut glass tableware, just like Dorflinger did, built a pavilion where they actually demonstrated glass blowing, glass cutting, and glass engraving. And this is an engraving of the Gillander glassworks at the Philadelphia Exhibition. And I think this did a huge amount to spark public interest in the American cut glass industry.
Port Jervis.
They are now, yeah. And they were in Philadelphia. They moved to Port Jervis, exactly. Yeah. And so Gillanders operated a complete glassworks right on the fairgrounds. And it was a great opportunity for people to see something that most of them probably had never seen before. And that's how the glassmaking process actually worked. And here's an interior view. You can see the furnace, pretty substantial furnace. You can see pressed glass being done here. You can see blowing here, and they also had cutting and engraving as well. Gillander, and Dorflinger we'll see later on, did the same thing, also produced pieces to be sold as souvenirs during the fair. So here's a great example, the Liberty Bell celebrating the centennial, and Gillanders would make those and sell them to the public. This example is in the collection of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, donated by the company. And then here's a paperweight that showed the main exhibition hall, the main hall of the fair as well. And there were a number of other souvenir items in glass that were made by Gillander and then sold to the public. Gillanders also exhibited some wonderful engraved glassware. So by the time of the Philadelphia Exhibition, 1876, engraving had become very, very popular. You also had seen an influx of very skilled engravers from Bohemia, from Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia to America, looking for better opportunities in this country. And so Gillander exhibited several examples. These are all in the collection of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I really wish the Philadelphia Museum had better images. So these are the best images they've got. It's just really hard to see the quality of the engraving work on these pieces. And quite frankly, I'm kind of hopeful that as we get to the sesquicentennial celebration in a couple of years, we can get some better images for some of these pieces, because they really are remarkable and wonderful examples of engraving. So here's a goblet by Gillanders. Here's a wonderful picture with horses. And then here's another picture with birds. So just great examples of engraved pieces. All three of these donated by family members or the company to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. This stereopticon view shows you the interior of the main exhibition building. And so you had these very long hallways, open almost like a shed, that would extend all the way down this very long building. There were 4 towers at the 4 corners. The 4 towers were given to major European countries for their exhibits. Most of the American firms would be down the center of these rooms. And then the way the fair managers decided to set things up, the farther away you were from America, the farther away you were from the center of the hall in terms of your exhibit space. So the Asian ones would be sort of scattered out to the edges. And then some of the American companies would be exhibiting along the sides of these long hallways as well. And here's another good view of some of the exhibit space in the main exhibit building. This is a good image of the glass, some of the glass exhibits. Quite frankly, the most elaborate of all of the glass exhibit spaces were the New England companies. So the New England Glass Company and Mount Washington, this one is Mount Washington here, exhibited chandeliers, lamps, a variety of cut glass goods, and they had these really large and elaborate display areas in the center of the room. So not too surprisingly, they got photographed. We have yet to find a photograph that actually shows either Dorflinger's exhibit space or the other Pennsylvania companies. And we think as a result, what we had were somewhat more modest displays set up along the side of one of those long exhibit hall spaces, and they just didn't attract the attention of the photographers. So we still haven't found any images of the Pennsylvania companies. We've caught a corner of a sign for some of the Pittsburgh companies, which leads us to believe that all of the Pennsylvania companies were probably in a row along one side. But this is a good example of some of the more elaborate display booths. Now, this is an interesting new discovery, and this is the one that I really added to the presentation here. So this is a goblet that I bought last year at the ACGA convention from one of the dealers. And I was pretty convinced it wasn't Dorflinger, but I thought it was a wonderful example of engraved glass. So on one side, you have the Bunker Hill Monument in Boston. You have the date, September 10th, 1876, and you have the initials DV. And as you look at the engraving, we'll see several views of it. You can see the quality of the engraving is really remarkable. So there's a little more close-up view of the Bunker Hill Monument. Perfect image, of course, for the Philadelphia exhibition, since you referenced the Battle of Bunker Hill. On one side, you had a pine tree, and you had an Indian, and the detail on the Native American is really remarkable as well.
What did they use to cut the glass like that?
It was done with a copper wheel engraving lathe, and we have an example upstairs of the machine. You can actually see it would have been a foot treadle operated machine with small copper wheels, and you used emery powder and abrasive and oil that act as the abrasive to do the cutting work. But it's very fine and very detailed work. Some of those copper wheels are like the size of the head of a pin. They're that small, and this would have taken a true master engraver to be able to do this quality of work. And on the final side, you've got a palm tree, and with a ship down at the bottom there. And I did some images with a black background because they make the engraving show up a little better. So again, here's the Bunker Hill Monument, the front of the goblet. Here's the pine tree. Here's the palm tree.
How long would it take someone to engrave that?
This would have
It's gotta be
taken
weeks, right?
yes, it would have taken a fair amount of time to do this work. Probably a master engraver could probably do one goblet in, say, a matter of a week or so, but it would be pretty constant, steady work to be able to do this work. And then here's the Native American on the other side. Okay, so we had this goblet. We thought it was a wonderful example of engraved glass. And then one of our friends who visits the museum fairly frequently showed up one day because he'd seen it. And he showed up one day with a book. And the book was entitled Cambridge Glass by Laura Woodside Watkins, that was published in 1930. And it was Cambridge Glass, 1818 to 1888. And in that book, there's a paragraph that says, at the time of the Centennial, Mr. Vaupel, and that's Louis Vaupel, who was probably the leading engraver in the country at the time, was chosen to decorate the pieces of New England glass that were sent for display there. Among other things, he made a set of 12 goblets, each with a different design of historical significance. Each goblet had a pine tree on one side and a palm tree on the other, with such subjects as Bunker Hill Monument and an Indian in his last stand looking westward over the sea. Unfortunately, these goblets were not destined to be kept together. 2 of them were broken, 4 were stolen, and the other 6 were given to officials of the company. And lo and behold, here's one.
And you bought it.
Yes, yeah. So this is the only one that we know of. There are Vaupel pieces in the Toledo Museum of Art, which had a close tie to the Libby Company. Libby became the successor of the New England Glass Company. There are pieces in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, but not one of these. So it's a remarkable find and a great tie-in to the Centennial and to the exhibition. And the date we haven't figured out yet. So we're at the early stages of researching it. But the date is September 10th, 1876. It doesn't tie into the Bunker Hill battle.
I mean, and there's no base, no stem.
Oh, there is. There is. This is a close-up just of the bowl. So if you go back to the first image, let me go back to that one. I'll show you.
I guess you don't let your grandkids play in there, huh?
Yeah. There it is.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, there it is, Paula. Yeah, yeah. So you can see the stem. Yeah. So it's just a remarkable example. And Vaupel was trained in Germany, was born in 1824. He came to America in 1850, so 4 years after Christian Dorflinger arrived. He spent a brief amount of time in New York and then received an offer from the New England Glass Company, which was really focusing on building up their engraved glass capabilities. And he spent the remainder of his career at the New England Glass Company. And I think he's generally recognized as, if not the finest, certainly one of the finest American engravers during this time period. And there are a number of really remarkable pieces that he produced over the years for the New England Glass Company.
So wouldn't that piece sort of be almost priceless, right? I mean, it's a very rare piece.
It's just a neat piece to find, and it was part of that set. And thanks to Watkins' work in writing the book, we know exactly what it was, and the description obviously matches the piece to a T.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just a neat find. I wish it was Dorflinger, but it's still just a wonderful find from this time period. And it shows you the quality of work being done by the American companies at the time of the exhibition. This is another really interesting piece. This one may actually be Dorflinger. Kurt and I are going back and forth on this a little bit. So you have the top and the bottom pattern, very similar to pattern number 210, Dorflinger's pattern number 210, and then with these miters in this panel in between. This piece is 24 inches tall. So it's a huge cologne. What you began to see at World's Fairs, where a lot of these glass companies would produce these oversized or outsized pieces for exhibit and for display. They'd almost be competing against each other, who can produce the larger items. One of the other New England companies, the Mount Washington Glass Company, had a 5-foot fountain that they displayed at the Philadelphia exhibition. But this is another piece owned by one of the ACG, American Cut Glass Association members from the Centennial as well. Possible that it was Dorflinger. Okay, now we're getting to the Dorflinger pieces. So this set may be one of the most famous sets of glassware that Dorflinger ever produced. In fact, that the American companies ever produced. So this set was made by Dorflinger to exhibit at the Philadelphia Exhibition. And I think that this set, more than anything else, shows you the change that was taking place in the design of cut glass within the American industry at the time of the Philadelphia Exhibition. And this is probably the kind of set that would really have excited the public and create a huge amount of demand for glassware by these American companies. So this set had a decanter, and you see the decanter here, it's 20 inches high, and 38 wine glasses, one for each state in the Union. The decanter has 3 panels. So here's one panel, and there were 2 on the backside that aren't visible. On the first panel, you had the seal of the United States and the words "Liberty and Union, now and forever, one land, inseparable." On the second panel, you had a portrait of the Goddess of Liberty, and with the words "Goddess of Liberty" on the top. And the third panel had the seal of the city of Philadelphia and the inscription for Mayor William S. Stokely, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who was the mayor of Philadelphia at the time of the exhibition. You can see how deeply cut these glasses are and how deeply cut the decanter is. This is really different from the glassware I showed you earlier from the 1850s and 1860s in New York. This is a very different style of design with extremely deep cutting that makes the glass really stand out and the designs really stand out as well. So I'm going to show you several images of the different pieces. So here's another view of the decanter. This is that front panel with the coat of arms of the United States, and then 2 of the wine glasses.
How much would that decanter weigh? That must be pretty heavy.
It is, given how thick that glass is, and given the nature of those cuts, I'll bet that's probably about 8 or 9, 10 pounds. Yeah, because it's a big decanter too. So, and here's another view of it. Again, most of these are images from the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The one thing we don't have are images of the other 2 panels. So all of the panels you'll see are the front one with the seal of the United States, which is fine, but it would be nice to also see the others as well. And then hollow diamond cutting, you can see on the neck, a combination of sharp diamond down here, and then fine, very fine diamond work here, and you alternate these different panels, and then with miter cuts separating the different blocks of the panels. It's just an amazing and exquisite example of the artistry of cutting glass at this time. And here's an example again of one of the wine glasses. You can see the state seal here. So 1 wine glass for each state in the Union. There were 38 states, and each glass had the seal of the individual state and the name of the governor at the time. But you can see how much of the glass has been cut away to create those panels and those designs. And look at how elaborate the cutting is on the foot. Just a remarkable set. Here's another example of one of the wine glasses, and this one is one of the ones in the Dorflinger Glass Museum. So this set had 38 wine glasses and the decanter. There was an accident, and some of the examples in the set were damaged at the Philadelphia Museum. And so as a result, several of the glasses were deaccessioned. And they were deaccessioned to the Wayne County Historical Society. One of those, the New York glass, is still in the Wayne County Historical Society. Several others went to Fred Saddam, who had arranged the transfer. And 2 of those are in the June Hardy collection at the Dorflinger Glass Museum. One is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and one of them is in the Corning Museum of Glass. And some of them you can see where the wine glasses were damaged a little bit. Some of them have virtually no visible damage, but the one in Corning in particular has been ground down at the top, so the top of the wine glass is probably about half as high as this one is here. So we actually are fortunate to have 3 of them here in Wayne County. The New York glass is in the Wayne County Historical Society. Mississippi is at the Dorflinger Glass Museum. Hank loaned one, which I believe was Missouri, to the Everhart Museum. And Michigan is in the Metropolitan Museum, and New Jersey is in the Corning Museum of Glass. So you can actually see which shelf broke when the damage occurred. So it was the M's through the early N's. Those were the states where the damage happened. But again, remarkable design, and we're really fortunate to have 3 of them here in Wayne County. Another view of one of the ones in the Dorflinger Glass Museum. The balance of the set, the decanter, and the remaining glasses are in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And this set was given to the city of Philadelphia at the end of the Philadelphia exhibition, and the set became the first gift of glass to enter the American glass to enter the Philadelphia Museum of Art's collection. Here's another example, and I think that's the Missouri one from the Dorflinger Glass Museum as well. Okay, so terrific set, wonderful part of Dorflinger's legacy, and you can actually see the decanter and I think 6 glasses on display at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. But when you look at the design and the detail of the cutting, you can see how this set the stage for more elaborate cutting work by the American companies and a desire on the part of consumers for work being produced by these companies. This is an engraving of the awards exhibition. So all of the exhibitors had the potential to receive an award for the work that they had done and the quality of the goods they had presented and shown at the Philadelphia exhibition. Here is a copy of the certificate of award given to Dorflinger for its cut glass tablewares. We have a copy of the certificate on display over in the office building, but the original certificate is on display in the Wayne County Historical Society in Honesdale. Definitely worth a stop by to see both the New York glass and to see the original certificate. This is the medal that was given to recipients. So it's 4 inches in diameter, bronze. It was struck at the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia. Let's see, did I jump? Yeah, here we are. So you have a figure of a woman on one side representing America, and on the other side, the description of the award. There were 2,000 of the awards given out, and they were given out to recognize the quality of work done by the exhibitors, not necessarily to rank the exhibitors. So if you participated, you won. Everybody got a medal, and the medals were all the same regardless of what category they were in. Okay, so now what we begin to see are examples of Dorflinger glass that either directly reference the pieces that were exhibited at the Philadelphia exhibition or are derived from those pieces. And here's a good example of a decanter cut in the same exact pattern as the Centennial decanter set. Not cut quite as deeply, different shape to the decanter, but cut in exactly the same design or the same pattern. And this is in the collection of the Factory Museum. This chalice, another example, cut in the same design as the Centennial set. This one still has the Brooklyn Star foot, so in some instances Dorflinger looks back to design elements that he had used many years before, but he's also looking ahead in the detailed design of the piece itself with that same combination of sharp diamonds and fine diamonds in the blocks in the design. Here's a goblet, and what makes this one so interesting as well is that it has a pattern cut foot on the goblet, also cut in the Centennial design. So pretty clear that the Centennial set did have an impact on the public and on Dorflinger's customers, as Dorflinger then continued to produce pieces to sell to his customers in the Centennial design. And here are a couple of wine glasses also done in the same Centennial design. Some of these pieces have monograms on them, so clearly they were special orders, and others don't. This decanter was also exhibited by Dorflinger at the Philadelphia Exhibition, and it had a combination of miters in the center panel and then strawberry diamond cutting above and below. A nice early shape to the decanter with a pattern cut stopper, and Dorflinger exhibited a pair of these at the Philadelphia Exhibition. These decanters and also a candy dish cut in exactly the same design or pattern as the pair of decanters. Those stayed in the Dorflinger family. So this is Christian Dorflinger's 75th birthday party in 1903. Here's Christian Dorflinger here at the head of the table. This is Fred Saddam sitting next to him. And if you look at the sideboard, there are the Centennial decanters that Dorflinger had exhibited that stayed in the family. Here's another example. This is in the collection of the Factory Museum, done in that same pattern as those Centennial decanters, again with the mitered panels in the center, strawberry diamond above and below, but a different shape. And here's the same pattern or design in a plate. So here you have the mitered panels, here you have the panels of strawberry diamond in between, and if you go to American press glass, you'll see that this same pattern shows up in American press glass with the name Jacob's Ladder. Here is a set in the collection of the Dorflinger Factory Museum, red cut to clear, very similar in terms of its design. The larger strawberry diamond panel here, the mitered panel below, but in color, red cut to clear, which is more unusual. Again, you see the Brooklyn Star foot on the feet. We originally thought when we acquired this is a small pint decanter and the small glasses, and they had this S monogram on them, which originally thought perhaps this was a sherry set, but then we found goblets as well. And to date, we've now found 5 of the goblets. So what this says to us is that somebody had a very unusual complete table service done in color, which is just very unusual. If you look at our dining room display upstairs, you'll typically see one color cut to clear wine glass for white wine as part of the individual place setting, but not multiple color pieces. But someone obviously ordered a complete table service done in color, which is very, very unusual. These pieces are in the same shape and form as a place setting of glassware that Dorflinger exhibited at the Philadelphia Exhibition. The ones that Dorflinger exhibited had panels rather than the sharp diamonds here, and then at the top you had engravings of people and animals and very different hunting scenes done on those pieces. Those pieces remain in the Dorflinger family. I think they're in Jane Beer's collection, but these pieces done in the same shape with engraving at the top and with the fine diamond cutting around the bottom of the base. You have wine glasses here and then cordials or sherry glasses here. Here's another view that shows the engraving. And again, what you began to see as you moved into the late 1870s with engraving work is that the glass was also getting lighter and more delicate because the engraving work could be done on thinner glass and made the engraving work really stand out as well. Dorflinger did these pieces for sale at the Centennial, just like Gillander did of the pieces that we saw earlier. So here you've got a cologne bottle done in opaque white glass with Centennial and 1876 on it. Souvenirs that people could buy and take home with them from the Centennial. This one is in the collection of the Dorflinger Glass Museum. Hank Loftus found this one. This was a real find. One, it's in great shape, but most importantly, on the bottom, it had this paper label. And this paper label predates the paper label that we're used to seeing on Dorflinger glass. This is the earliest paper label we know of, would have dated then to 1876. And if you look at it, it has all of the kinds of glassware that Dorflinger produced: a goblet, a decanter, and a champagne flute, but also a beaker, a pharmacy piece, and also a lamp chimney with Dorflinger's trademark on it. So kind of a neat early example of a Dorflinger paper label that we just don't see anywhere else. Here are more examples of the cologne bottles that Dorflinger produced in color designs. Here's the Centennial one, these done in a little more flamboyant colors. Here's a wonderful example made for Mary Saddam, Christian Dorflinger's daughter. This is in the collection of the Dorflinger Glass Museum, just a wonderful piece. And back more cologne. Here's an example of the druggist's wear. And this was patented by E.L. Witt, who ran the decorating department for Dorflinger. Now, Dorflinger actually triple dipped at the Philadelphia exhibition because he won an award for the pharmacy wear, the commercial products. He won an award for Dorflinger's glass works products, and Bailey and Dobelman, the old Greenpoint factory in Brooklyn, won an award as well. So he actually participated in the Philadelphia exhibition in 3 different ways. And here's an example in the Factory Museum's collection of one of these pharmacy beakers or measures. And an example of the early lamp chimney that's featured on the label. Dorflinger made these at the time of the Philadelphia exhibition, George Washington bottles. And they were made for a company in Scranton that produced a product called Simon's Centennial Bitters, to be sold in 1876 to celebrate the centennial. So there are reproductions of these but you can tell the difference between the originals and the reproductions if you look at the detail, like on the buttons. The reproductions are pretty crude and pretty simple. We've got a couple of the repros and one of the originals as well. But they were made by Dorflinger also around the centennial. President Grant, we talked about the Grant service during my White House talk, originally ordered in 1874. The Grants went to the Philadelphia exhibition. David Dorflinger had one of the ledgers for the company that had an annotation in it that noted that the Grants reordered this service in 1876. Could have been at the exhibition or could have been separately as a reorder for the table service they'd ordered in 1874. And here again, we talked about this a little bit at my previous lecture, but the modern elements that are coming into these designs, like the flash star foot on the base of the cranberry cut to clear wine glass, the cut hollow knob on the stem. This is feeling more modern. It's feeling a little bit more elaborate in terms of the kinds of design work that Dorflinger was producing at the time of the exhibition, even a little before, and then coming out of the exhibition that led to the more elaborate designs during what we know as the Brilliant Period. This is another wonderful example of a piece made by John O'Connor, who was the foreman of the cutting department here before he moved on in 1890 to set up his own cutting shop. This goblet was made for his daughter, Catherine Merritt O'Connor. It has her monogram on it, and you'll note the similarity to the wine glasses in the Centennial set. Same exact shape, same kind, a little different stem, but very similar, elaborately cut foot as well. So a piece that grows out of the design in the Centennial set. This had 3 oval panels, each one engraved, one with his daughter's initials, one with birds and fruit, and birds and flowers. This is an anniversary gift. It was an anniversary comport. It's dated 1879. And again, you can see it has some similarities to what we saw in the Centennial set, but Dorflinger now is going, and the American companies all are going beyond that to add more detailed design, more elaborate cutting in all elements of the piece. So you see miter cuts on the stem, you see this elaborately cut foot with the alternating panels, and on the bowl you have these miters, or these panels with the 2 different designs going around the piece, the notched curve on the top, reminiscent back of the old Fowler comport as well. And so a more elaborate design, and you're starting to see the transition to what we all now refer to as the brilliant period of more elaborate designs. Here's the engraving, 1854, congratulations, 1879. So we knew it's 25 years, to initial HH. The Latin phrase translates to an uninterrupted chain unites us. So told us it was a wedding anniversary gift. Okay, other examples of stemware done in designs that are very similar to the anniversary comport. The alternating panels, the arched panels on the pieces, the elaborately cut foot with the alternating panels as well. Here's the champagne flute, the saucer champagne. And so examples that really derive from the kinds of design elements that we saw in the anniversary comport. This is another early Dorflinger design from the late 1870s, where you see these interlocking arched panels with fine diamond cutting and strawberry diamond cutting. Just a really nice example of how patterns are starting to get a little bit more complex in their design and in their execution. The blue cut to clear, cobalt cut to clear wine glass is just a really exceptional piece. And it's very unusual because the bowl is color cut to clear, the foot is color cut to clear, even the stem is color cut to clear as well. Here's a celery vase, a form that was very popular in the 1860s, and cut in hollow diamond, which was also very popular in the 1860s. But now you have a very elaborately cut foot that uses a design element that was so frequently repeated in the brilliant period, a hobstar. So this is clearly a transition piece from elements of the old days to elements of what became the new standard of design in American cut glass. And it really set American cut glass apart from any of its international competitors. Here is a chalice in the Russian pattern, patented in 1882 by Philip MacDonald, who worked for the Hawks Company in Corning. Very popular pattern during the brilliant period. This example, executed by Dorflinger in 1885, one of 10 of these presentation chalices done for the Honesdale Songfest, and presented to each of the Liederkranzes from the area who participated in the Songfest. This was made for the Scranton Liederkranz, and this is in a private collection. Here's the Parisian pattern, developed and designed by John O'Connor, patented in 1886. And again, you can see how you start with the simpler designs, now you're moving to the more complex designs, really keying off the elements exhibited at the Philadelphia Exhibition, alternating panels in the petals on the foot and the different alternating panels in the design, and these elaborate curved miter cuts on the bowls of the stemware as well. Another early John O'Connor design or patent, Florentine, and again, this is where the American glass industry was moving. More and more elaborate designs. Hob stars, right here as you see on the base. Stars, curved miter cuts, fans around the border of the top. Same thing for Sultana, another famous early Dorflinger design in the brilliant period, designed by John O'Connor, an expanding star pattern where everything starts at the beginning and expands outward. You can see how these patterns are becoming more and more intricate. Where did it all start? It all really started with the Philadelphia Exhibition, creating the excitement, creating the demand among consumers for the quality of American cut glass being produced, and urging the companies on as they constantly developed and began to implement new designs and more elaborate patterns to their work. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.